York's classic rock, Q1043.
Ken Dashow, it's the time of the season to talk with Rod and Col. Rod Argent, Colin Blunstone of the Zombies. Welcome. How are you?
Really good, Ken. It's great to talk to you. Great to talk to you.
God.
Yeah, really,
Rod, you well? Colin, you well and healthy?
Well, touch wood, mate. Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. And we've been recording away our new album, and we're getting very excited about what we've got and can't wait to get it finished. We really hope to get it finished this year so that next year when we start touring again, we can tour with a new album. We've got how many songs, Cole? We've got about 7 at least started, haven't we?
Yeah.
And 4 pretty much finished, 4 or 5 pretty much finished.
Yeah.
And it's getting exciting because for the first time, Ken, in a long time, we've been able to get our bass player, Soren, over from Denmark to actually join us so that we can actually record as a band together, which more and more we love doing because of the interrelationship between playing and recording, so that you can always hear, Colin singing a guide vocal and you can react to it, or I can hear what Steve's doing on the drums and subliminally alter what I'm playing, and same for him. This is a really listening band and it's exciting to record. And we're getting some great stuff. Colin's still singing great. It's, it really feels a privilege to be at this stage and being excited about our new work.
It's a blessing that, that you're sometimes, I mean, I'm looking at Paul, at Ringo, that sometimes, God willing, your talent remains at such a high level that you can keep doing it. If you're lucky enough to have it, to me, it's a sin not to do it. It would be, it's a shame. It's the one question that I had asked McCartney a while back. I said, what question do you hate? He said, there's only one stupid question. When they say, you don't need the money, why do you do it?
Yeah.
Why do I do something I love that the world loves? And on every level, if you love playing, writing, and singing, and we love watching you, why would you ever stop? When am I going to leave radio? Like when I draw my last breath, or they throw me at gunpoint off the air? I've been doing this since I'm a kid. I love sharing music with people.
It's a huge privilege, and I don't think there are many other professions in the world other than music where you can feel that rejuvenating influence of getting up in the morning and thinking, do you know what? If I hadn't been earning a really good living all my life doing this, I would have been paying to do it because it's what I want to do. And that's it's rare to be able to have that privilege, I think. So, you're right, Ken. We should enjoy doing what we love, and we should luxuriate in it, really.
Well, we talk about the band, and we always talk about us as an emerging rock band, don't we?
Yeah.
You should. Why not? And there's a joy to it. To quote to me the Oscar Wilde of rock and roll now, Keith Richards, as he's become, who said, once he said, because you don't get applause when you take out the garbage at home, baby. And I thought, that's it.
And as long as you're getting applause while you're on stage, well, that's one step up from that, I have to tell you.
All right, so this is very exciting, guys. Saturday afternoon, New York time, Saturday the 18th, 3 p.m. There's going to be a Zombies show being broadcast live from that little white EMI Studios building on the Abbey Road. And we get to see it if you go to Veeps. That's where you log in, veeps.events/thezombies.com, veeps.events/thezombies.com, and I'll post that and all this. But to see you guys live in Abbey Road playing and talking, to me sounds like one of the coolest things to do. That is exactly what I would want to do on a Saturday afternoon. How did this all come about?
What do you think, Colin? It came about really through our managers and us talking and saying how frustrated we were with the lockdown and the fact that we couldn't play. I mean, this is going to be the first time we've played live for 2 years. Yes. So
there might be a few rough edges.
It's bloody scary, I have to tell you. But at the same time, it's very exciting, isn't it? Because Colin and I were there in 1967 recording Odyssey and Oracle. We were there together when Chris White and I produced Colin's 1 Year album, and I also played on that album as well. And well, not with Col, but then I was there in 1972 with Argent, recording Hold Your Head Up. But I recorded there also another couple of albums with you, Col, didn't I, that I was producing with Chris?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, well, Ennismore and Journey. And I think you did several Argent albums there. And of course, I recorded with Alan Parsons there.
Beautiful.
Five Alan Parsons albums. And he recorded in Studio 2 as well, which is where we're going to be. Normally, the Zombies and Argent and me, we were always in Studio 3, I think, weren't we, Rod?
We were. But let me tell you also, Ken, there's a little bit of a flashback in the sense that I don't know how well you know Colin's 1 Year album, but I still think it's a very special album.
Brilliant.
And some of the special quality in it came from the wonderful string orchestrations by Chris Gunning. And he did Say You Don't Mind, which was a huge hit in the UK and in parts of Europe as well. And also that album has become a cult in itself. And the marriage of Colin's voice with those arrangements. Chris was very much a classical composer as well, and we loved his work, and we got him to do arrangements. And there's one song that we're actually doing 3 songs with a string quartet or quintet as part of the Abbey Road concert. And one of those songs it's the only song on our new album that is a throwback, because it's a song that both Colin and I love. It's something I wrote really quite a few years ago called I Want to Fly. But I always heard that as Chris Gunning doing a 1 year sort of arrangement to it, just with Colin singing. And I played him the song, and he absolutely loved the song. And he said, I'd love to do this. And he has done it. So we will be playing that in Abbey Road in the same way that we were playing one of some of our songs with Chris Gunning's arrangements in 1970, was it called 71? 71. So that's a little throwback. But also I've done a couple of string arrangements as well for this beautiful string quartet that we've got on 2 new songs of mine that I'm very excited about. And I know Colin loves them as well. So, you know, I hope they come off beautifully, because it's a very exciting thing for us to be revisiting there and recording there again.
String quartets and rock bands in Abbey Road Studios. I have a hunch that went well through the years, that has been successful. All right, I'm going to ask you both a question that's impossible to answer, but I've asked everyone because maybe someone has it. This little white building, we think of this thing as the Taj Mahal. It's this little white building. It's deeper and bigger once you get inside. But right there on the Abbey Road, when I go to London for the holiday with friends, they're just about, at the next zebra crossing. They're about 100 yards up the road. And this little building, the magic that came out of that building, the Beatles, Pink Floyd, the Zombies, 100 other bands we could admit. Everyone said back then in the 60s, the equipment wasn't fancy. The soundproofing was kind of dirty. The lighting wasn't very impressive. Why was there such magic in this place that made these records that have lasted forever? What was there about that place?
I think one of the things was that they just had exceptional recording engineers, and people like Jeff Emmerich and Peter Vince, and both of whom work with us. And although sometimes maybe the equipment wasn't absolutely cutting edge, it was all quality equipment. And some of that old equipment now is really sought after because it gives such a wonderful, warm sound. So although, maybe it did look a little bit antiquated at times, it was really quality equipment.
Yeah, I mean, to amplify what Colin said, I think they had this wonderful marriage also of really old school tradition, because they had a section where the boffins in Abbey Road, some of the guys have been working there for many, many years, even in the Beatles time, and this thorough, old-fashioned scientific approach on the one hand, And on the other hand, this cutting edge inventiveness of people like Jeff Emerick. And I know Jeff Emerick was about 17 when he took over
Crazy.
majorly the Revolver, the sound on the Revolver album. And I think even George Martin said that was Jeff's album, really. He was responsible for the sound on that particular album, you know. So they embraced new talent along with having this whole raft of people that have been there for many years, because it started with Elgar in the 1930s, Abbey Road. So it's this wonderful mix which still exists. You know, the last time we went to Abbey Road, we met this guy who'd been there absolutely forever, and he talked about a guy who invented stereo, someone called Alan Blumlein, in 1937. And they've got a plaque up in there because they worked with him in those times. And strangely enough, the guy, you know, this is really going off trail here, but a guy who's just become an electrician in our house here in Hampshire happens to be his grandson, a great grandson.
I mean, that's a legacy. That's a legacy to the world. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was just thinking that we were talking about Jeff Emerick, and he wrote a great biography. It's called Here, There, and Everywhere. I don't know if you've read it, but it's a really good read.
It's sitting on the shelf right behind me on in my music room. It's sitting right. That is my Bible for the Beatles and what it did, because I don't care if they ate a ham sandwich on Tuesday between the I don't care what you had for lunch when you were recording this song. How did it come about? And as you said, he's 17 years old, and to the late Jeff Emerick, he's just such a beautiful man and shared it openly. 17 years old, and again, there's the rock band. So this is not the London Phil. We'll throw the kid on the rock band thing. And his first thing, he walks in when he gets outside being the tea and tape boy. John Lennon says, "I want to sound like the Dalai Lama on this song. Tomorrow Never Knows." And okay, let's leave Jeff to sort it. We'll get some tea. And
yeah, exactly.
And that was what they were like. But one of the things that really surprised me, and it might be why the 17-year-old engineer kind of got the gig with the Beatles, was that, and I was amazed, if you read his book, it'll say that the engineers there didn't want to work with the Beatles. I would have thought they would be killing one another to work with the Beatles. But of course, they worked right through the night. And then the engineers couldn't go home to bed then. They had to start up again the next day with whoever was coming in, whatever artist was coming in. So generally speaking, people didn't want to work with the Beatles. And that could be why the 17-year-old kid, Jeff Emerick, got the gig, because, you know, he could take it. He'd stay up all night, and then he'd have to start working in the day with someone else.
Yeah, and he said, you know, that's what I wanted in life. I knew this was my calling. He said so many bands had come in saying, "Can we have the Beatles engineer? Can we have the Beatles engineer?" Why? Well, we want to have a Beatley album. No. And he said, when you guys, when Rod Argent, Colin Blunstone, the guys came in and said, "We want to create something brilliant. We want you to help us find our sound." He said, "That's what I want to work with. That's the group I want to work with." And between all of you and Jeff, you create your own Sgt. Pepper's legacy of Odyssey and Oracle. And it's no coincidence that man who physically cut Sgt. Pepper, as he said, with a pair of brass shears and double tracking and slowing down the tape and speeding it up as it went, was the guy to help you create your legend and give you a sound. When you hear the sound of a Zombies song, that's the sound. You have a definitive, you know, it's a brand, it's a sound, not just your voice, Colin, this haunting, beautiful voice, but this is how these songs are going to sound. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that Jeff has a hand in how that came out at the end of the day.
Of course, yeah, and you know, sadly and ironically, we hadn't seen him for some time, and he came backstage when we played at the Greek Theatre in Los Angeles, and he was just said over and over again, he said, "We must work together again. We must." And as he left, he looked back and he said, "We must work together again." And I think it was within a week or within 10 days.
It was a week later that he died. He said, "You must call me." He said, and he said, "I'm talking about in a week or two." He said, "You must call me." And he said, "You know, there's no reason why we should not work together again." And as we walked out, as Colin said, he called after us, "Don't forget, I'm not just saying this. This is not just me being nice. we have to do this. And then a week later, he was dead.
It was so shocking. It was so sad to me. I learned so much about the process, not equalizations, settings, or knobs. He said to me, I don't know why, he said, I've always heard sound as color. And he said, the sounds I was trying to layer were like paint. I thought of it as painting blues and yellows and reds. And when a band came in, he said, like the Zombies, who have this multicolor palette and want to try different colors and different combinations, that's what excites me to clean the paintbrushes and give them a chance to make a beautiful picture. And I thought, there isn't another engineer who ever used that analogy and explained it like that. And yet that's exactly what it is. It just blew me away.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a great way to describe it. It really is. And strangely enough, I've often seen music in color, actually, visually.
Really?
From being very, very small. Yeah. From being a little kid. Yeah. So that's interesting.
That is why you've told the story before. And again, this goes back to Abbey Road, that we get to see you streaming, performing live, talking about the studio Saturday afternoon, September 18th, 3:00 Eastern time here in New York. Veeps.events/thezombies.com, veeps.events. And I'll put this on all of our social media. But if you don't mind, the Beatles, they had just finished, were finishing up Sgt. Pepper's, and I believe John Lennon's Mellotron was still in the studio. Would you? How did it wind up on Odyssey and Oracle?
Well, it wound up on Oracle because I thought, what's this thing here? And I sort of played it, and it made some string sounds, and I thought, well, we've got a very limited budget. This might be a way of getting some orchestral sounds. And I started out thinking that. But then, of course, once you start playing it, you realize that because of its mechanics, you do get orchestral sounds, but they've got an extremely mellotron character and color to them, which in the end made it much more unusual and more of a signature than actually just using an orchestra, beautiful as that may have been. Would have been. So we started using it and loved it. And I have to say, Ken, immediately, both Jeff and Peter Vince, the other guy who did lots of recording there with us, had a wonderful feeling for how to treat the mellotron, maybe because they've been recording with the Beatles with it. But, knowing how to put echo on it to bring out the character of it, etc. And we loved it from the start, and it ended up over half the album. I mean, typically what would happen is that I'd put down the keyboard part that I'd rehearsed with the band, and then because of the technical advances that the Beatles had brought about by working with the boffins at Abbey Road, by people like John Lennon saying, listen, the Beach Boys have had 8 tracks. And they said, well, there isn't an 8-track in the country. And he said, well, can't you sort something? And they did. They worked out a way of being able to make available more than 4 tracks. And so with us, suddenly we had the availability of overdubs. So very often I would put my keyboard parts down, and then in the remaining time of the session, which might only have been half an hour, I'd say, let me try this, this mellotron. And I've often said this, but I never asked John. I mean, I didn't know him. But thank you so much, mate, because it gave a real character to the album, I think.
Another exciting thing from that was that when we went into the studio, there were all percussion instruments lying around on the floor. And we knew that the Beatles were the last people in the studio. And so we were picking up tambourines and maracas and things, knowing that the last people that used those instruments were the Beatles. And we were huge Beatles fans, and still are.
Yeah.
And still are. So that was very exciting. The only unfortunate thing was that they actually finished about 2 days before we started. So we never actually met them.
Oh.
But that was a shame.
But the musical, as you can see, the bass on my wall in the music room behind me. It's
yes.
Popular bass. Yeah.
I mean, there is a magic to it. One of the things I said to Jeff Emmerich is that of all the tricks, of all the things he came up with, again, now in Pro Tools, you click on a filter or you click a button and it simply puts in something it took Jeff days with string and another engineer and somebody holding a pencil and a tape loop, the things he had to create physically by, stuffing a doll into the drum head and putting a mic in the vent underneath the piano that you can do now. I said, but I think, Jeff, your greatest talent is how you can record the human voice. And given voices that are as beautiful as Collins, as John Lennon's, as Paul McCartney's, I said, all the levels that you did, my problem with Phil Spector is that the voice was just a tambourine to him, is that he buried George Harrison's beautiful voice in the layers and echo. And I resented that. Like, the star is the voice. You have to get everything else right. But Colin's voice soars through these songs. The Beatles' voices were never overwhelmed, even with all these levels. I said, and especially bouncing tracks, I said, that's the genius. And he gave us a little smile and said, thank you. Thank you. In his quiet little way. But it's not easy. It sounds easy, but if you're doing all that, to make every track just sing with the vocal being on the front and the harmonies still being in the right spot, there's a delicacy to that art that is amazing.
It's a feeling for structure, for shapes, for colors, for everything that goes up to, to make any work of art work, whether it's a humble work of art or whether to make a song work in those days, the only way to make it work, because there were no loops, there were no, there was no way of just calling up a great drum riff that was already sampled and then quickly making a song out of it. The only way to make it work and to actually reach out and touch people was to get the structure absolutely right. And then somehow in a way that no one really understands. And when you're putting a song together, you have a feeling for what the structure is, but you don't really understand all the nuts and bolts of what you're doing. But when suddenly that structure starts to work. And it's this sort of subconscious thing that you either understand or you don't, or you're lucky enough to be able to put something together sometimes, and in those days things were so inventive because that's the way you had to do it, and I believe that you ended up with more inventive chord sequences in those days because that made something which titillated the ear and made you feel that you were being led into something, whereas nowadays you can get an instant gratification with sound, because you've got a great loop and you throw a little vocal thing over it and you've almost got a single already, but in the end it can end up, and this is an old man, talking about this, but it can end up just sounding so samey and so throwaway,
I think often a great a great idea of whether a song is really good and whether a performer is a good performer is when you hear just a piano and voice, or it can be guitar and voice. If it's a good song, it should stand up, and if the performer is good, that it will sound just as striking. If it's a good song, it'll sound just as striking with a voice and a piano. But if it's just sounds, if you take the sounds away, and a lot of records are like that, you take the sounds away and there's some kind of riff going on, but it doesn't stand up to just being played acoustically. And I often think that that's a good way to judge. Well, the songs that I like anyway.
I feel the exact same way. Again, pop music is pop music, and if it turns people on, but everyone of our collective generation who's making music always said the same thing. Ian McDonald was up a while back, and Ian lives here in New York from King Crimson fame and Foreigner, who's been producing. He said, my judgment for a song was always, could I listen to this 500 times and still enjoy it? 10 years from now, if I put this on, would I think, oh God, what was I thinking? Or can I listen to it and defend it as the art that I think it is? I said, if you're trying to do that, plus, as you said, you're making decisions instead of an unlimited number of tracks, you're making artistic decisions that are real, that are alive. It's like playing live almost in a studio, but with a few other takes. And there's a magic that comes from that I don't think computers are perfect, but some, I bet there's 100 things on Odyssey and Oracle, little things that were late or early or slightly off that you didn't redo, and
Oh yeah,
that's what makes it alive.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it's the overall picture has to work, and serve, each element has to serve all the other elements, but that's the most important thing. Yeah.
So we get to see you guys Saturday afternoon, the 18th, 3 p.m. in Abbey Road Studios. Well, you're going to be in Studio 2.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you going to give us a little tour of Studio 2, and will you show us where everything is and show us the control room? That would be kind of cool, because so many of us have never been inside, or we've seen a static picture, but seeing guys who have recorded there, who've been there, to show us how you see it, what you think, that would be pretty cool.
That would be good. And also, I would say that I understand there's going to be 5 cameras there. So I think they will be shooting everything from every angle possible. So you will get an idea of certainly of what Studio 2 looks like.
Of the mechanics, yeah, and
Yeah.
what's going on.
I
would think
because there's a control room in Studio 2 that's 1 story up, and there's a wooden flight of steps going up the side of the studio. And I've always thought of that as the walk of shame. When the producer calls down to you and say, this is not working. You better come up and have a listen to this. And you have to go up these bloody steps. Click, clop, click. Oh God, what's he going to say? I've never known another studio like that.
It's Paul's even said the same thing in the early days when George Martin would say, come upstairs, please. Like, oh, did he like it? Did he not like it? What, and you get your grade, and he said it's exactly what it felt like for them in the early days. I don't know if you've heard the joke. My favorite joke of recording today is, what did the Pro Tools engineer say to the young ingenue singer? That sucked. Come on in. What difference does it make?
Oh wow.
We're done. We're dead. That's it. I'll fix the rest of it.
Yeah.
So listen, go to, guys, veeps.events/thezombies.com, grab a ticket to this. And this is important. Some people don't do this, is that once you log in, once you buy this thing, you can watch it as many times as you want for the next 2 weeks, bring over friends, have viewing parties with it, and you can upgrade your ticket to watch the Q&A that Rod and Collar are doing, as well as to purchase an exclusive shirt and poster. Very cool. So it says here you're doing hits, deep tracks, some unreleased songs from the new album. Do we have a title for this new album? A working title, maybe?
Not at the moment. No, we don't actually. But we have working titles for the songs that have been recorded. As I said, we're very proud of what we've got so far. So I hope we can finish it off in the same vein. And can't wait for it to be released, really.
Can't wait to hear it, and can't wait to see you tour. And and getting back to this will be with us at some extent. My hope is that we talk about COVID-19, it'll be a flu that goes around, and we'll get to that level where people aren't going to the emergency rooms and clogging up the ICUs, and more people are getting vaxxed, both in the UK and here, and we can just push this to the side so that we have shows. Because right now people are touring and you have to cancel a few shows because somebody in the touring company tested positive. It's working, but it's not normal. My dear friend Steve Hackett is leaving this weekend for a UK tour. And he said, listen, you can sit around and wait or hope for the best. And we're going to go out, fingers crossed, with blessings, and see how it goes. And that's where we are. That's where we're at.
Well, we're going to, on the Abbey Road concert, we're going to be doing what people would expect us to do of the old stuff, about half of Odyssey and Oracle, at least 4 tracks anyway. We'll be doing some deep cuts from old Zombies things, trying to make them work still, if we can remember them after 2 years of not being on the road. And we're also going to do 5 new songs. So this is really very exciting for us to do. But we're taking risks in both hands there. And 3 of those new songs will be with this beautiful string quartet, which is put together by a girl who works with ELO. She's very used to playing rock and roll. She's also a classical musician herself. So she really straddles both sides of things. And the actual recording of those string tracks has been done on the album, and it sounds absolutely beautiful. So I hope we can replicate that on the day and just once through, as you say, this is a performance. This is what we're going to do. And I really hope we can get it across to the people in the place.
I think it's going to be magic, because the point is of our music, it doesn't have to be perfect. It
No.
has to be real. It has to be alive. That's the music we grew up on, is not perfect, real.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Will there be an audience at all in Abbey Road Studios for this?
A small audience, 30 people. There are COVID restrictions there, and so it has to be 30 people. But apparently, our management has got 10 super fans from America to fly over, and then we'll have some family and some interested people and friends. And apparently, there are 2 or 3 questions coming from people whom we don't know who they are yet, but they're sort of quite famous and so that'll be interesting as well on the question and answer session. So looking forward to that too.
Oh, it breaks my heart that I can't be there. I wish beyond that would be a joy to be there. Hopefully next time that we get to see you here.
Absolutely.
Rod Argent, Colin Blunstone, thanks so much for your time. Again, Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m., the 18th. Join in veeps.events/the zombies. I can't wait to see you play live again. Thank you so much. Be well, be healthy.
Thanks so much, Ken.
Thanks,
Great
Dan.
to see you again.
Great to talk to you.
New York's classic rock, Q1043.